Welcome back to another episode of Just Because Live. I'm Chris Nicolason, and today I'm honored to be joined by Britt Kwan from the Justice Center here in Colorado Springs. Britt, I reached out to you because I've actually done some of your guys' events and things like that. Your name kept just popping up on, my LinkedIn and other areas and, what have you. So I wanted to have you on not only to tell your story, but also to talk about all the great things that the Justice Center offers in town for people that may not be aware of it. So thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris.
Absolutely. So let's start. The way I generally like to start is with you. And so if you can kind of talk a little bit about your background, where are you from, and how you got to the Justice Center. Let people know about that.
Yeah, so I am originally from Iowa, like a lot of people in Colorado. Migrated out here after college with a friend, just pretty much desperate to get out of the Midwest. When I first started out here, I worked at an overnight camp in the mountains. That was kind of the summer job I was able to get, but ended up coming on full-time staff with them for 2 years as a registrar and doing some finance stuff. And then after that, I transitioned to a parachurch ministry in town, one of many, and was lucky enough to work on a small team there, which I really enjoyed. And I got to wear a lot of different hats. So my job kept constantly evolving over the four and a half years I was there. So discovered that I really liked being in the nonprofit world, discovered that I really like being on small teams. And now I'm on the smallest team ever because it's just me and a couple of interns. So.
Gotcha. Interesting. So where did you go? So you grew up in Iowa. Where'd you go to college at?
I went to a small liberal arts school called Central College. So it's in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, small Dutch town that has a tulip festival every year. So
okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, my wife, there were 8 kids in her family.
Yeah.
The first 4 kids were all born in Iowa. The next 4 were actually all born in Ohio. So there's a giant Iowa v. Ohio State battle each year.
Yeah.
And so I think that'll be postponed this year just because of the Big Ten. But outside of that, very interesting. So then after Central College, what led you then ultimately to take the leap out here?
Essentially, I feel like a lot of people from the Midwest end up staying in the Midwest and doing normal Midwest things, which there's nothing wrong with. But I was talking with one of my friends from high school who was going to school out east, and we just decided that we were going to move somewhere together, so it'd be easier to move as a pair. So she had a friend who could get us jobs at this summer camp in Colorado, which we thought we were maybe too old to do that, but we decided to do it anyways. And that was actually the Waldo Canyon fire year. So we worked at that camp for a couple weeks and then literally got surrounded by fire. So we ended up just processing refunds for the rest of the summer. So we were one of 10 staff to stick around. So
interesting. Yeah, I tell people too, because I had somebody on a few weeks ago where I was talking to them about the Waldo Canyon fire.
Yeah.
And I remember telling the story where my wife and our 2 daughters who were in high school at the time, we hiked Waldo Canyon for the first and only time, a week before the fire hit. And I was actually a law clerk. So I was interning at a law firm up in Woodland Park while I was going up to DU back and forth.
Yeah.
And so the pass got shut down. Judge Colt, who used to work up in, who was the judge up in Teller at the time, ended up doing hearings down in El Paso because he couldn't get up the pass and things like that. So yeah, it was quite an experience. I mean, a lot of flexibility and adaptation had to happen during that time.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting.
I'm glad I never got to hike that though. I heard the punch bowls are pretty great.
So. It was really cool. And it was one where, for me, at least as a parent, I just remember when we started, because it was a pretty long hike, but I remember my oldest daughter being upset at us and just not having any of it to start the first half of it. My youngest daughter was totally fine. Then midway through, there was just this switch between the 2 of them where the youngest would, on the second leg was just completely upset and had it. She wanted to be done. And the oldest was like, what are you talking about? This is fine. And so, it was this funny personality switch. Yeah, exactly. And so then you go forward and you talked about having to work in a small team, and I can absolutely, equate, empathize, and understand that because that's what we have here as well. So talk about what you really enjoyed, in your prior, jobs about working in a small group. What things do you really like about that?
Yeah. I think, I mean, I was still early 20s, I think, when I switched over to that job. But I think one of the unique things about being on a small team is you get to do like real work. And sometimes on a larger team, you get stuck doing busy work that's not actually challenging. And I had a boss that was super empowering. And if we had ideas, we could pretty much just take them and run with them. So I think one of the things I loved doing in that job is making systems better. And so when I came in, I inherited this simple system that really wasn't cutting it. And so researching different technology,
Yep.
had to fight through some of convincing the CFO of the company that we needed to use this software, but ultimately ended up getting it. And so just like an opportunity to try stuff that I felt like I knew about, but didn't necessarily have a ton of experience with. So it's just maybe go out and get it. I worked on an ebook, processed like 3,000 registrations a year for people doing like short-term volunteer trips around the world, and got to work with a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, small teams, you kind of just get to do everything and wear a bunch of different hats. And then there was a lot of transition on my team over the years, just because there's a lot of young people working on the team. So when people left, I took over marketing from one guy just because I had time. So yeah, it was fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and we've got my friend Morris watching out from Alabama. I was talking to you about him earlier, who says hello. He's an attorney out there. And we're big all the time. And in our groups that we're in, we talk a lot about systems and how important they are and trying to come up with new things. And we talk quite a bit here too about the idea of being flexible within your position, even because things will change, and we have to keep changing with the times. And it's one of those things where I think, COVID has actually kind of shown how important having those systems in place and the ability to adapt has been. Have you found that to be true as well too?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that actually. We have switched to 2 new softwares since COVID started, which has been really exciting because we've needed to for a while, but I think everything's been so urgent and immediate normally, like with our applications and phone calls, that I just didn't have much margin for that. But since COVID started, our application rate has dipped. And I haven't been busy traveling to clinics all over the city. It's just over the phone. And so one of my summer interns has been super helpful in getting us set up. We use Practice Panther now for all of our client intake, which is one of many tools like that.
Right.
And then we switched to this other software called Telsio for our calling clinics. So our calling clinics, I was getting like 50 calls a night, which meant like people calling me constantly at the same time, so much so that our other software just kept glitching. So now we can actually queue calls, and the clinic is so efficient that we can get 34 calls in a 2-hour period, and it feels like nothing.
Wow.
Before, we just didn't have capacity. We get maybe 26 calls a night, and now it's like 40 to 50 on average. So
wow. Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. So I want to talk now for a minute too, because you talked about how it's now you as that small team. Mm-hmm. So you are wearing, can you talk a little bit at the Justice Center so the title of executive director is one thing, but if just you, then you are wearing a bunch of different hats. So can you tell everybody like kind of what that role encompasses? Like what all do you do in a day, week, job, what have you?
Yeah, I kind of just do everything. I don't think it's probably a typical executive director role.
Right.
I'm just like doing super strategic things all the time and thinking at a really high level. I feel like I'm learning more about that for sure, which has been awesome. Mm-hmm. So managing all of our programs and like the day-to-day of our services, which include free legal clinics every week, processing applications for free and reduced cost attorneys. We get about 700 a year. I think we're going to see a dip this year. And then working on like educational legal events with local legal aid organizations and the Access to Justice Committee. So we've got a few of those coming up, Legal Resource Day and Senior Law Day. So that's all the normal day-to-day stuff. And then aside from that, I do all of our bookkeeping. I work with the board of directors. I'm trying to think. Grant writing I do, not exclusively. We also work with a grants consultant, which has been huge. Some of our board members also help us out with writing some of those grants, but pretty much any other administrative tasks as well, I'm in charge of. So.
Wow. So you never get bored, do you?
No, which is nice. I am nervous. I was like most afraid of being bored when searching for a new job.
Oh,
So
wow.
when I came across this one, I was like, I don't think I will be bored.
No, not a bit. So then let's talk for a minute then. So what ultimately brought you over to the Justice Center? And when you found that, how's it been for you so far?
Yeah, I've been here since the beginning of June 2019. So I had some normalcy before COVID hit, but it's been great. I found out about it very randomly, as I feel most jobs happen.
Mhm.
I had a friend who was working for the bar association, and she told me about the position, and I was kind of applying for anything. I'd been unemployed for a few months and was just trying to sort out if I wanted to stay in the nonprofit world or if I wanted to try to move over to for profit,
Right.
but ultimately not feeling super inspired by any jobs I was seeing in that world. So
Mhm.
was kind of back to nonprofits mentally in my mind. Um, and yeah, I think had several interviews where I went in and was excited about it beforehand, and then after talking with the staff, I was just not excited anymore. Um, but the Justice Center was good because I went in for an interview and felt super excited and like I had a good connection. And yeah, they emailed me a couple days later, and it just moved really fast. And I think it's ultimately because I knew someone there.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
how
Perfect.
every job has for me has been. So
Right. Oh, that's awesome.
yeah,
So then when at our firm, what happens a lot of times is, we'll get, a lead that'll come in with where somebody has a legal issue.
yeah,
And then we'll talk to them, but then they'll look and we'll say, well, if it's an hourly case where they have to put a retainer down,
yeah.
they'll look and go, look, I just can't, afford this.
Hmm.
Can you talk about kind of how the Justice Center, can like what they can do to help outside of the for-profit attorneys and law firms,
Yeah.
and what services you guys offer over there that can help people out?
Yeah, so we essentially have two programs, but one place people can apply. So all of our programs require people to be financially eligible. So you have to meet certain income requirements. So we have a free program where people can apply for a free attorney. And essentially for that program, you have to be below 200% of the federal poverty line. But a
Yeah.
lot of times we see cases like bankruptcy cases. We've had several more of those right at the beginning of COVID. We get a lot of family law. We do get some landlord tenant issues as well. Because we work with all volunteer attorneys who are normally from the local bar association or otherwise, it's normally at least a 6-week turnaround on cases for our pro bono program for
Okay.
family law cases, because we do take post decree cases, and a
Ah,
lot of them are for people with trauma or persons with disabilities or veterans or seniors. We try to prioritize vulnerable audiences in our community for that program.
okay.
We do have another program though. So the pro bono program, nobody collects any attorney's fees for that program at all. And then we have something called a modest means program. So
Mhm.
people can have a slightly higher income. They're still below a certain percentage of the federal poverty line. But for that program, we can consider criminal cases, which we see a fair number of criminal cases for veterans come through that program. Or if people have a family law case that's more pressing, and if they're willing to pay a billing rate of 125 an hour, which I would
Ah,
say is probably about 30% of a normal family law attorney's fees.
oh yeah.
Um, yeah, they have to do an initial retainer to cover the first 10 hours of work. But other than that, we try to keep it pretty affordable. And
Mhm.
we've had a lot of growth with that program over the last year. I think it's just letting people know about it. It's also a lot easier to get attorneys to take a case, at least for a small amount of fees, rather than taking it for free. So
Gotcha.
that program's been cool too.
Interesting. And so it's one of those things too, where there is the ability for, so when someone comes to me and they're just like, I'm like, look, here's what our fees are.
Yeah,
And they're just like, look, I just can't afford that. So,
yeah,
so there is hope out there for them to still get some guidance, still find legal counsel potentially. And even if it's not at a free rate, at a pro bono rate, at least then it's at a much discounted rate.
yeah. We can normally always place somebody through the modest means program. Through the pro bono program, it is difficult. We need more family law attorneys for that program, but we can normally have them, attend our call-in clinics as often as they can to at least get advice if they're getting through some upcoming court dates. So
Absolutely. And can you talk about that then? Your call-in clinics. I've done both the in-person and the call-ins. Can you talk about those and kind of what those are, and what your experience has been in kind of running those and what you see?
Yeah, so our clinics have only been call-in only since COVID started. Normally, we would host them at different places around town, like Penrose Library downtown, Citadel Mall. We hosted one at, trying to think of the other location. It's been so long since I've been there in person. The Marion House. So a lot of them were centrally located, which I know makes it harder for people who are living in rural areas. But essentially, you walk into the clinic, we figure out what type of legal question you have, and then we pair you with an attorney one-on-one who can give you some free legal advice. And depending on your question, that lasts anywhere from 10 minutes to sometimes 45 minutes.
Right.
Um, and the phone in clinic is exactly the same. I am normally the call screener, except for tonight. My intern's doing it for me. And your call gets screened just to figure out, is this a family law question, criminal law? And then it gets sent to the appropriate attorney, and you get to chat with them one-on-one over the phone. And everything's confidential. So
Excellent. So that's just like getting the ability then to chat with an actual attorney. Just basically you guys offer this great resource over there. And
yeah.
so that's
And
awesome.
it's crazy since COVID started. Like, we've had such an insane number of calls that we had to do a clinic every Wednesday night. We were doing every other Wednesday, and it just wasn't meeting the need. So we switched to every week.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. And traffic has doubled since COVID. So it's just been nuts. I think we may stick with this format moving forward. So.
Oh, interesting. So then has your need then too for volunteers actually, because now you've switched it to every week, has that raised up then during that time?
Yeah, normally we could get by with like 4 or 5 attorneys for call a lawyer, but now we need 8 or 9 every week. So
Gotcha.
we've had a lot of new volunteers expressing interest, which has been pretty cool.
Good. And what are you looking for then in a volunteer? Like, what kind of person or avatar is the type of volunteer that you're looking for?
Yeah, honestly, anyone with experience. So obviously an attorney, but anyone, family law experience is important. Landlord tenant. Before the new moratorium went in place again, we were having landlord tenant calls, insane busyness with that for the last several weeks. It dipped last week, I noticed. But as we get closer, I think August 26th is the date when that ends.
Ooh.
So I think we're going to get a ton of calls then as well. So anyone, landlord, tenant, and family law are important. We do get a lot of traffic questions. Employment law questions right now are really important. We do get some bankruptcy and tax related questions. Pretty much criminal law, like if people have an area of law they feel comfortable speaking to and can take the random other question about a dog bite or something else that comes in, that's always helpful too.
Now, Britt, is there any area of law that the Justice Center won't tackle that you guys would refer out or say this is kind of outside of our scope or area that we would have somebody available to help you with?
Yeah, for clinics, we try to always answer it. So only for our application programs, we do turn away personal injury cases.
Gotcha.
Employment law cases are normally too long and too drawn out. Immigration cases that are related to asylum, we can't take. And normally contested probate cases, we can't take for representation either.
Okay. Perfect. And can I ask you too, because I've talked to family members and friends, that have used like the public defender's office and things like that. But then when I'm talking to them, there's this perception that the public defender isn't as good as an attorney that they would pay for, right?
Yeah.
And so what's your thought on that? Because I want to hear your thought, and then I'll let you know what mine is, because I'd be very curious.
We sometimes get complaints like that too. And sometimes I think it's a user error. The person has unreasonable expectations about their attorney and their time. And sometimes that can happen with our programs too, where there's unfair expectations being put on their attorney. We try to control that as much as we can. But my guess is with the public defender's office is they have a ton of cases that they're working on.
Right.
And I think people have an expectation for maybe communication with their attorney that is maybe unreasonable based on their schedule.
Right. Yeah. I think too, for me, it's one of those things where I talk about it, I've taken the bar exam and I'm like, I know they've done that same thing too. So they're just as qualified and people that can handle those large caseloads, or people then too that are giving their time, by volunteering or by doing it at a reduced rate. I think that is a lot of value. And it's just because you're paying somebody else, a lot of money for it, it doesn't necessarily mean you're still going to get the same result that you're looking for ultimately.
Yeah. And I think, different clients have different needs too. I'd say we get some clients that are more high need and like want more communication, and others that are understanding and are grateful for whatever they can get. So
Wow, interesting. Very interesting. So now talk to me too, because you had mentioned Senior Day. Can you talk about what that is?
So Senior Law Day, I'm trying to think of what year this is in terms of maybe the 5th year they've done it.
Okay.
So Senior Law Day is an event focused on educational workshops for seniors around the area of law. So this year, I know we're doing it all virtual, online. There's actually a link to it on our website, but it is September 12th. It'll be in the morning from 9 a.m. till 2. There's going to be virtual workshops. Brookdale Senior Living is helping us to live stream it, but it'll be on Medicaid. There'll be a probate class, and there'll be something on wills, trusts, and estates. And then during the day too, we'll be able to take phone calls for seniors who want free legal advice, and we'll have volunteers kind of standing by for that.
Oh, that's excellent. Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Very cool. So then can you talk to for a minute, because we keep getting new orders from the El Paso County courts, right, on how things are functioning over there. What is the Justice Center's role with the courts? How do you guys kind of interplay with, the judges over there and the staff and things like that? So how does that work?
Yeah, I would say a majority of my interaction is with the folks in room S101, the Self-Help Center.
Yeah.
We work with the Sherlocks a lot.
Okay.
When there's not a worldwide pandemic, there's normally volunteers that are present in that room offering free legal advice. So a lot of my family law attorneys and probate attorneys, they would normally volunteer Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And so the clerks can't give free legal advice.
Right.
So people come in and they're like, how do I complete this form? What should I put? The clerks can just say, hey, go over there and talk to that guy or that girl, and they can give you the advice. So, so normally we're present in that room. Aside from that, sometimes if there's a particular case we're working with, we'll connect with the clerks or the judge's offices. But normally that's a situational basis.
Gotcha.
We're also a part of something called, or we're on the committee for the Civil Pro Bono Project, if you've heard of it.
I have. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that's an initiative started by Judge Schetz. It's for court-appointed counsel. So he was part of one of the founders of the Justice Center too back in 2011.
Oh, great.
But, kind of one of the needs they were seeing on the court side of things is that if situations are coming before the court and there's a need for an attorney to be in the situation, the judge can say, okay, we want to get this person counsel. Here's a list of attorneys that have signed up to volunteer through this project. I'm going to nominate one of them and make up to 4 nominations unless everybody declines, but hopefully one of them says yes,
Right.
This person an attorney. And so that person would also be waiving any attorney's fees and representing that person pro bono. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So sometimes we can kind of work with them if there's like a more desperate case where it's like, okay, we ran out of time to find a volunteer. Can you appoint somebody? And because your nomination carries a bit more clout, then that person was more likely to say yes. So.
Absolutely. Interesting. Yeah, I have heard people in the past or judges in the past tell us too, is that even if they can be on a case where, because I mean, you have different variations of a case, right? Where it can be 2 pro se parties or parties that aren't represented, or, and where I've even come on where it's just me and then the other side is not represented. Yeah. And the judges will still be like, thank you, because it can help kind of just steer the boat or drive the bus in a direction that can ultimately either help resolve a lot of the issues, and maybe there's only 1 or 2 sticking points left. So it's not everything is still out there. And so that can be very helpful.
Yeah, totally.
So what's interesting is I was telling you that I've talked to a few other people in town that are executive directors at nonprofits and things like that. And there's always this thing that I see about this like joy and passion for people that work in nonprofit, and like just this true love for the job and actually what you do by helping people. So what do you love about working at the Justice Center? Like what things get you up each day where you're just going, man, this is pretty freaking cool?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess this is the job I think I've most connected with the purpose of the job before. So that's exciting. I feel like I'm getting like a little bit closer every time. Yeah, I think access to justice in general is like an obvious, like, hell yeah, like why wouldn't I be excited about that?
Right.
So I love working with volunteers because, I mean, all the volunteers who I'm working with like already get it and see the need and like want to sign up. I mean, there's other people that I like badger all the time over email, and when I can go to events, like stalking them down at lunches with my clipboard. But I mean, most people are already excited about it and see the need. And so it's just kind of like giving them an avenue to serve.
Perfect.
And then working with clients can be like both life-giving and really challenging because a lot of the things they're wrestling through can be super heavy. Um, and so sometimes that can kind of be weighty. But focusing on like, okay, well, like we're going to help this person to the best of our ability. And when we can't help them, we're going to refer them to other really awesome organizations in our area that are doing like tangential work. So,
Nice. Can you talk about that a little bit? What other organizations do you guys work with in town? Are you guys, kind of either referring out to, and obviously they're all situational, but who else do you guys kind of work with?
I think one of the biggest learning curves for us is figuring out how better to work with other nonprofits in town. We work really well with other legal organizations like the Sherlocks and the Self-Help Center and Colorado Legal Services
Nice.
and TESSA. But I would say there's a lot of other things where people are facing complex issues that can't just be solved with legal help. So
Right.
like Aspen Point does a really great job of working with mental health, referring people to organizations like Westside Cares.
Yeah.
If they live on the west side of town, they can enter this lottery for like a rent assistance.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
they just do really cool work. And Energy Resource Center does, free energy efficient upgrades to homes, which can help people save on their rent bill every month. If they're having to choose between like food and groceries and do I pay my utility bill, then
Right.
maybe that helps them not have to make that decision. So I think figuring out what sort of referrals would be complementary to the way we're trying to help people. I think that's kind of like a interesting thing where I'm learning more and more all the time about other nonprofits that can, be a good fit for different clients. So
Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome, because it's not just about you saying, well, look, we're in this box and all we do is the legal side, but we may not do the thing, but I can at least get you in touch with somebody who ultimately can help you out with this area of your life that you're struggling with or what have you.
totally. Yeah.
Oh,
Normally it's like a holistic fit,
yeah.
not just like, let's solve this legal thing. So
Right. Oh, that's so great.
yeah.
And so can you tell people then too, if they're having quite like legal questions and they're like, I can't afford a big retainer or things like that, or if they're just like, look, how do I find you guys? So how do people find you here in town? Where are you guys at? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, the best way right now, we're not in the office. I'm obviously still working from home. And
Fabulous background, by the way.
made sure it was nice and clean
I
before.
know.
But yeah, you can go to our website. It's justicecentercos.org. So that's the easiest way to find us. You can apply online. We have something up there on our clinics and any of our upcoming events. We're probably a couple months out on a really comprehensive referral guide that we want to do to kind of highlight other nonprofits in our community. So we'll have that up there. We have an abbreviated version up right now. But yeah, so a lot of information on there, and you can contact us easily there too.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, excellent. I tagged your website in the comments as well. So perfect. And then, so we're running up pretty close to time here. And then what I want to do is start winding down. And then with that, I always want to ask these two questions, especially for people that live here.
Yeah.
So the first question I always like to ask is, what is your favorite place in Colorado? So you came out here from Iowa, you love the place that you so much you decided to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So since your time here, what's your favorite place?
Crested Butte. I don't know if everybody gives that answer, but it's just like the most beautiful town, and it doesn't quite have the like really produced vibe of Aspen and Vail and Breckenridge. Feels a little more sleepy. Has a great, fall scene there where you can do a bunch of hikes. So
Nice. Oh, that is awesome. Very cool. And then my second question is this: if you were not doing this,
yeah.
you weren't the executive director over at the Justice Center, what would your dream job be?
I've got a very random answer for this. I would be running a bakery with a bunch of French delicacies. I don't know, French bread, baguettes. I love making bread and pizza. Very obsessed with croissants and things like that. So me and my husband traveled around New Zealand end of 2018, and they just had so many charming bakeries there that I was like,
Wow.
This looks like the dream.
Oh,
So,
interesting. It's like I think I saw a Hallmark movie about that a couple of weeks back. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
Yeah, there's always a bakery or something kind of like that in those. But
Yeah.
And then, so I do have to ask, you mentioned New Zealand, and I had a friend that went there last year with his family. And so anytime someone goes to New Zealand, I do have to ask, did you guys end up hitting the Lord of the Rings area whenever you guys were out there, or no?
We didn't. We weren't quite that intense about it, but I mean, pretty much everything looks like it could be out of those films. Like the beautiful scenery you see in those, like it's like literally everywhere. So
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
really miss it.
Very cool. Well, Britt, I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about yourself, your background, and then also talking to us too about the Justice Center. We appreciate all that you do. And hopefully too, if this gets out there, that people, for the attorneys that are on my list and that follow me, hey, if you need, if you're looking for something good to do right now in this time, is, reach out to Britt and volunteer. Because I'm guessing you guys aren't going to turn away attorney volunteers anytime soon.
Never. So.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for coming on. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave you with the last word. Just any thoughts that you might have, anything positive or uplifting that you can just close with. I'll leave the floor to you.
Oh gosh. Okay, so one thing I was thinking about before this is one of my old roommates had a phrase called keep it small, which maybe sounds like kind of pessimistic, but I think a lot of things are overwhelming right now with COVID and elections and everything else going on in the world. And so that was kind of her mantra for, if there's something small I can do that's good, or like small victories I can have, then I'm going to focus on that. And I think same with volunteering. Like if you can say a little yes to something good instead of just having grand intentions, I think that's better. So keep it small is my phrase.
I love it. Oh, thank you so much for that. And then with that, we're going to keep it small, and we appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much, Britt.
Thanks, Chris. See ya.